The complex web of connections that underpin global trade and finance leaves the world economy more exposed than ever to natural and man-made disasters. That's according to the OECD in a new report entitled Future Global Shocks. The report's principal author, Jack Radish, joins me now. Jack, just first of all, we saw the subprime crisis. What lessons have been learnt from that, and what could or should we be doing differently now as a result of it?
Well, I'll tell you, the subprime crisis is a very good example of a shock event that can have effects on more than one continent and requires international cooperation between governments and also input from the business sector, how to contain this and how to react. We see not only a financial crisis on the horizon, but you have pandemics, of course, we recently lived through. You have the European ash cloud, which had disruptive effects on supply chains. And of course, most recently and unfortunately, the Tohoku earthquake and Fukushima accidents following the tsunami in Japan. Yeah,
you say, Jack, I think in the report that, part of the risk is the increasing interconnectedness of the world. Isn't that just a reality? And that's not really something that can be turned back. The world is interconnected and getting more so.
Absolutely, and that is one of the conclusions of the report. We're not suggesting that policymakers turn back the clock on globalization, but we are finding out that there are vulnerabilities that we hadn't considered before, and that's going to require some identification of where these interconnections lie, even between social and technical systems as well as economic systems.
We're seeing another, even potentially global crisis shaping up in the Eurozone crisis. It certainly could have global implications if things went severely wrong. Are there things happening there now that are concerning to you and things that should be done differently? Let's take, for example, speed of government reaction. Is that something you worry about?
Well, thanks for asking that question. Look, that's being monitored very carefully, and surveillance overall for all these shock events, the capacities have to be strengthened. But we see an incredible amount of cooperation across European governments to get their hands around this problem and figure out what are exactly the policy measures they need to take to contain it. There's been a great amount of cooperation on the part of Greece, notably with the Commission, with the leading economies in Europe. And I'm very optimistic about the results and the lessons that has for dealing with global shocks overall.
You talk about surveillance, and that perhaps brings us naturally on the question of regulation, which after all is about market surveillance in a sense. Are you recommending more of that, tougher regulation, more regulation for markets?
Well, more regulation doesn't always mean better regulation. And we've noticed in this project especially that when regulations are uniformed, that we can create actually systemic risks while trying to stamp out some of the smaller ones. So one of the main results and conclusions of this report is we have to think about diversity of systems in order to create more robust systems. And that is true not only in technical systems, but also in the financial world.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're saying diversity is good, and yet governments, there seems to be a big push in terms of governments in terms of harmonizing the way they regulate, no regulatory arbitrage. But are you saying actually some sort of arbitrage between jurisdictions is actually a good thing?
Well, what I'm saying is that not all one approach fits all players. We're very supportive of the Basel III procedures, but you have some players, very important players, for the resilience to global shocks, such as insurers, who are not necessarily well suited for the same type of regulations as banks.
You brought this report out today, Jack. What are you hoping governments could or should do off the back of it? What would you like to see?
Well, I'll tell you right today, in the context of this launch event of the report, we've gathered together OECD governments to consider the creation of an OECD high-level risk forum. And this would be specifically the purpose to coordinate policies and identify these vulnerable points in complex systems, create the conditions for information sharing where these containment measures can be targeted to keep any kind of shock from propagating in future.
Okay, Jack Radish, thanks for that update from the OECD in Paris, and the reports come out today. That's all from us for now, but join us again at 13:50 London time, when we'll ask Deutsche Bank CEO Joseph Ackerman whether he's ready to take part in Greek debt restructuring. I'm Steve Clark. This is Reuters.